It was an ordinary morning at the small-town school, the kind of place where the classrooms were old, the walls were fading, and the students dreamed of leaving one day. Among them was a boy who never seemed to belong anywhere. He always came to class in worn-out shoes and clothes that were clearly handed down more than once. He didn't talk much, but his quietness made him stand out even more. Most of the other students barely noticed him, except when they wanted someone to laugh at for bringing homemade lunch or for staying back after class to clean the desks for a few coins. Every day after school, when the other kids ran outside to play, he stayed behind in the empty classroom. The teacher had noticed him once or twice, sweeping the floor while humming softly under his breath. She never paid much attention, thinking it was just a habit. What she didn't know was that the boy's favorite part of the day came after everyone left, the moment he could walk to the music room. The school's music room wasn't much. It had a piano that looked like it hadn't been tuned in years. Dust covered the corners and the paint had chipped off the lid. But to him, it was the most beautiful thing in the world. He had seen the older students practice on it before, and every time he passed by, his heart would start beating a little faster. The sound of the piano always felt like a story being told, and he longed to be a part of it. No one had ever taught him how to play. His family could barely afford school fees, let alone music lessons. But sometimes, when the classroom windows were open, he would stand outside and listen. He memorized the tunes the older students practiced, each note sinking into his memory like words in a book he never wanted to close. At home, he didn't have an instrument, so he used his old wooden table as a make-believe piano. Every night, his fingers moved across it, pressing invisible keys as he repeated the melodies he had heard during the day. One rainy afternoon, while waiting for the storm to stop, he wandered into the empty music room. The teacher hadn't locked the door and the piano stood there quietly, almost inviting him. His hands trembled as he lifted the lid and sat down on the worn bench. He pressed one key gently. The sound was soft but alive. He smiled. Then he tried another note, then another, and before long he was playing the melody he had heard through the window just the week before. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. From that day, he began to sneak into the music room every chance he got. Sometimes early in the morning, sometimes after everyone had gone home. He practiced with pure focus, his small hands learning to stretch and glide over the keys. The piano became his secret friend, the only place he didn't feel poor or invisible. One day, the music teacher walked in earlier than usual. She opened the door quietly and froze when she saw him sitting at the piano, completely lost in his own world. The melody that filled the room was the same piece she had played for the older students just a few weeks ago. Her first thought was disbelief. How could this boy, who had never taken a lesson, be playing something that complex? She stood there, watching his fingers dance across the keys. There was hesitation in some notes, but there was emotion too, something raw and beautiful. When the boy noticed her standing there, he jumped up immediately, his face pale. He muttered an apology and tried to leave, but the teacher stopped him gently. She asked, "Who taught you to play that?" He didn't know what to say. He lowered his head and said quietly, "I just listened." The teacher asked him to sit again and play something else. At first he hesitated, afraid she might scold him for using the piano without permission. But her tone was kind, so he sat back down and began to play another tune, one she had never taught to any of her students. It was a simple melody he had made himself, soft and full of feeling. When he finished, the room was silent. The teacher didn't know what to say. In all her years of teaching, she had seen many students with skill, but never someone who could feel the music the way this boy did. That evening, after everyone had left, she stayed in the classroom thinking about him. There was something rare about the way he played, something that couldn't be taught. It wasn't about perfect notes. It was about how each sound carried emotion, as if the piano was speaking through him. She decided she couldn't ignore it. The next day in class, she told everyone there would be an upcoming concert at school and that she was choosing students to perform. The room buzzed with excitement. Many hands shot up when she asked who wanted to participate. Then, unexpectedly, the quiet boy in the corner raised his hand too. The whole class turned to look at him. A few students laughed, thinking he was joking. Even the teacher was surprised, but she remembered what she had heard the day before and nodded slowly. "All right," she said. "You can try." When the time came for practice, she announced that everyone had to choose a piece. She handed out sheet music to the students, including him. He looked at the paper as if it were written in another language. The teacher noticed and asked if he could read notes. He shook his head. She thought for a moment, then decided to test him. She played a short section of a difficult piece and asked him to try it. The classroom fell silent. Everyone turned to watch as he sat down at the piano. His fingers hovered above the keys. Then he began to play. The first few notes were hesitant, but as he continued, his hands started to move faster, finding the rhythm, remembering the melody. The music flowed, full of small mistakes, but also full of life. The sound grew louder, smoother, until it filled the whole room. The same students who had laughed before were now staring in silence. When he finished, there was no laughter, only stillness. The teacher stood beside the piano, her expression unreadable. Then she smiled softly and said, "That was very good." The boy looked up, his eyes wide. It was the first time someone had said those words to him about something he loved. After class, the teacher asked him to stay behind. She wanted to know how long he had been playing, who had taught him, and if he had ever taken lessons. He told her the truth, that he learned just by listening, that the piano in the music room was the only one he had ever touched. She could hardly believe it. She told him she wanted him to keep practicing, and that she would help him prepare for the concert. From that day, their after-school routine began. Every afternoon after everyone else had left, he stayed in the music room while the teacher guided him. She taught him small things, how to hold his hands properly, how to read simple notes, how to feel the rhythm rather than rush it. The more he learned, the faster he improved. It was as if he had been waiting his whole life to be shown what to do. One evening, the janitor passing by stopped to listen. The melody pouring out of the music room was smooth and graceful, full of feeling. He peeked inside and saw the boy at the piano, the teacher beside him nodding gently with pride in her eyes. It became a small secret in the school. People began to notice that something special was happening in that dusty old room. The boy still didn't have fancy clothes or a proper piano at home, but he didn't care. He had found something that made him feel alive. Music became his language, the way he expressed everything he couldn't say out loud. When he played, he forgot about being poor, about being laughed at. For those few minutes, he belonged somewhere. The teacher sometimes stayed behind long after he left, sitting quietly at her desk. She couldn't explain it, but every time he played, she felt something deep inside her move. It reminded her why she became a teacher in the first place, to discover the hidden sparks in her students that the world might overlook. As the weeks passed, the concert day drew closer. The boy practiced every evening until his fingers hurt. He didn't have a proper place to practice at home, so he tapped on tables, benches, even on his knees, imagining the sound in his mind. The teacher noticed his dedication and began to believe that maybe, just maybe, he was meant for something far beyond this small town. And though he didn't know it yet, the day he nervously raised his hand to volunteer in class had changed his life forever. The boy had never felt so nervous in his life. The day of the first real practice in front of others had finally arrived. Until now, he had only played for the empty music room for the teacher, or for the quiet corners where no one could see. But today, the teacher wanted him to perform the piece in front of the class. She said it was important for him to get used to the feeling of playing while others watched. The boy swallowed hard and nodded, unsure if he could do it. The classroom was full of students, all chatting and laughing. Some were practicing their own pieces, while others were just waiting for their turn. The boy sat quietly on the piano bench, hands trembling slightly. He could feel the eyes of the entire class on him, and the usual teasing he expected made his stomach tighten. The teacher gave him a small, encouraging smile. "Just play like you did yesterday," she said softly. "Don't worry about anything else." He took a deep breath and placed his fingers on the keys. The first few notes came out hesitant, not as smooth as he wanted. A few students snickered quietly, and he almost froze. But then he remembered how he had practiced countless hours alone, how he had imagined himself performing with confidence. Slowly, the melody began to flow. The hesitations disappeared, replaced by confidence he didn't know he had. The class went silent. Everyone was watching the boy as his fingers moved across the keys with precision and grace. He didn't just play the notes. He played the music, giving it feeling, emotion, and life. Even the students who had laughed at him before could not look away. Some leaned forward, their mouths slightly open, mesmerized. The teacher felt a warmth in her chest, a mixture of pride and disbelief. She had known he was talented, but she hadn't realized just how extraordinary he could be. When he finished, the room stayed quiet for a few seconds. Then a slow clap started from the back and soon everyone was clapping. The boy's face turned red, not from embarrassment, but from a strange new feeling. Pride. For the first time, someone outside the music room recognized his talent. The teacher nodded at him, her eyes shining with encouragement. "You did very well," she said. "Keep practicing and you will only get better." After that day, things began to change. The boy's classmates started to look at him differently. Some were curious about how he had learned to play, while others quietly admired his skill. A few even asked him to teach them small pieces, though he politely declined, preferring to focus on improving himself. The boy felt a sense of belonging he had never felt before, a feeling that had nothing to do with his clothes or his family's money. Music had given him a place where he mattered. The teacher, seeing his progress, decided it was time to push him further. She handed him sheet music for a piece that was considered very difficult for most students. It was long, fast, and full of complex passages that even her advanced students struggled to play. "Try it," she said. "I want to see what you can do." The boy looked at the paper, feeling a mix of excitement and fear. He had never seen anything like it, but he trusted the teacher and decided to give it a try. At first, he struggled, pressing the wrong keys and missing notes. His hands felt clumsy and the melody sounded broken, but he didn't give up. He stopped, listened carefully, and tried again. Over and over, he repeated the sections he found difficult, slowly piecing the music together in his mind. The teacher watched him closely, occasionally giving advice on technique or hand position. She could see his determination, his refusal to quit, and she realized that this boy wasn't just talented, he had an incredible work ethic. Many students with natural talent relied solely on their ability, but he practiced relentlessly, driven by something deeper, a love for music that no one could teach. After weeks of practice, the boy began to master the piece. Each day he improved, not just in playing the notes correctly, but in making the music expressive and alive. His fingers moved with increasing confidence, and his sense of rhythm became more precise. The teacher introduced him to even more difficult compositions, pieces that told complex stories through music. He absorbed them quickly, learning by listening and feeling rather than just reading the notes. Word of his skill began to spread beyond the classroom. Teachers from other subjects, janitors, and even students from higher grades started to drop by the music room to listen. They were amazed that such a young, quiet boy could play music that moved people, music that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than practice or technique. It was as if the piano itself had chosen him, and he was the only one who could make it sing. One day, the teacher decided to take a small step further. She invited a few parents to the classroom during the boy's practice, pretending it was just another lesson. She wanted them to hear what he could do. As he played, the parents were silent at first, then astonished. They whispered to each other, amazed at the emotion and skill coming from someone so young and from such humble beginnings. The boy, unaware of the effect he had, played as naturally as he always did, lost in the music. The teacher realized it was time for a bigger opportunity. She wanted him to perform in front of more people, not just the small circle of teachers and classmates who had seen his progress. She thought about the upcoming school concert and decided he should be part of it. She knew it would be a challenge for him to play in front of a large audience, but she also knew he was ready. Before the concert, she continued to push him. Some days were frustrating. The boy struggled with certain sections, made mistakes, or grew tired from hours of practice. He sometimes felt like giving up, but the teacher's gentle encouragement kept him going. She reminded him that even the best musicians had to work hard and that mistakes were part of learning. Slowly, the boy learned not to fear mistakes, but to use them to improve, to let the music guide him rather than his nerves. The day of the concert finally arrived. The school auditorium was packed with students, teachers, parents, and local residents. The boy waited backstage, feeling a mix of excitement and fear. His heart raced and his hands were sweaty. He had never performed in front of such a large audience. He looked at the piano on stage, the same one he had practiced on for months, and took a deep breath. The teacher gave him a reassuring nod from the side of the stage. "You're ready," she whispered. When it was his turn, he walked to the piano slowly, every step heavy with anticipation. The audience fell silent as he sat down on the bench. He placed his hands on the keys and paused for a moment, letting his eyes adjust to the lights. Then he began to play. At first, the notes were soft and careful, but as he continued, they became stronger and more confident. The difficult piece he had practiced so many times now flowed effortlessly from his fingers. Every note seemed to tell a story. The struggles he had faced, the hours of practice, the dreams he held close to his heart. The audience was captivated. Even the teacher, who had seen him play countless times in the empty music room, was moved to tears. When he finished, there was a moment of silence, and then the entire auditorium erupted in applause. The boy's face turned red, but this time it wasn't from embarrassment. It was from pride and joy. For the first time, he realized that his talent could touch others, that his music could make people feel something. The teacher walked up to him, smiling. "See," she said softly, "I told you you were ready." After the concert, several parents and teachers approached him, praising his performance. Some asked if he had ever considered studying music seriously. The boy, still feeling a little overwhelmed, nodded quietly. He had never thought about it before, but now he realized that music could be more than a hobby. It could be his path, his way out of the small town that had always felt so limiting. The teacher, watching him from a distance, felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She had discovered a hidden talent, nurtured it, and now the world was starting to see what she had known all along. She also realized that the boy's success wasn't just about talent. It was about courage, dedication, and the willingness to believe in himself even when no one else did. That night, the boy went home with a new sense of purpose. He sat at the small wooden table in his room and tapped imaginary keys, planning what he would practice next. He knew that the concert was just the beginning, that there were greater challenges ahead, but for the first time in his life, he felt ready. He had a teacher who believed in him, a gift that was truly his own, and the courage to pursue something bigger than himself. From that day on, the boy continued to practice with even more determination. He explored new pieces, experimented with different styles, and began to dream about a future where he could share his music with the world. The school, once a place of routine and ordinary days, had become the starting point of a journey that would change his life forever. And though he still walked to class in worn-out shoes and faded clothes, he carried something priceless with him, a spark of brilliance, a voice through the piano that no one could ever take away. After the concert, the boy's life began to change in quiet but meaningful ways. The music room was no longer just a secret place where he practiced alone. It had become a space where he was recognized, where his talent was finally seen. Even though most students still ignored him in the hallways, they looked at him differently now, with a mixture of curiosity and respect. Some would stop to ask him about the songs he played, or to watch him practice after school, hoping to catch even a glimpse of his skill. The teacher noticed these changes and knew it was the right time to take the boy's abilities even further. She introduced him to more challenging pieces, ones that required more than just memorizing notes. They were compositions that demanded feeling, interpretation, and a deep connection to the music itself. For the first time, the boy had to think beyond the notes on the page. He had to imagine the story behind the music, the emotions hidden between each measure, and let that guide his fingers. It wasn't easy. Some days were frustrating. He would sit at the piano for hours trying to perfect a passage, only to make the same mistake again and again. Sometimes he felt like giving up, feeling overwhelmed by the complexity of what the teacher was asking. But the teacher never gave up on him. She was patient and encouraging, reminding him that the greatest musicians often struggled the most, and that the only way to succeed was to keep trying. No matter how hard it seemed, slowly he began to understand. His hands became steadier, his timing more precise, and his ability to express emotion through the piano grew stronger. He learned to play softly when the music called for it, to make the keys sing with delicate emotion, and then to strike boldly when the composition demanded power and energy. Each piece he learned felt like a new story he was telling, a story that could reach people in a way words never could. One day, the teacher decided it was time to test him in a different way. She brought a complicated piece she had played herself when she was younger, one she considered nearly impossible for a student his age. She sat beside him and played a small section, watching his reaction carefully. The boy hesitated for a moment, glancing at the sheet music as if it were a puzzle waiting to be solved. Then he lifted his hands and began to play. At first, his fingers stumbled, hitting wrong notes here and there. But something remarkable happened. He listened carefully, adjusting as he went, remembering every sound he had heard. Within a few minutes, he was playing the section almost perfectly, his fingers gliding over the keys as if they knew them by heart. The teacher could hardly believe her eyes. She had never seen anything like it. It was as if the music flowed naturally through him, without effort, without teaching, just pure talent guided by determination. News of the boy's extraordinary skill began to reach outside the classroom. A few students from other grades came to watch him practice, whispering to each other about the quiet boy who could play music like an adult professional. The janitor, who had been cleaning the hallways for years, paused one afternoon to listen. He was so moved that he told the principal about it. Soon, even the school's headmaster came to see the boy perform. He was impressed, noting that such raw talent was rare and deserved recognition beyond the small school auditorium. The teacher saw an opportunity. She contacted a local music professor she knew, hoping he could guide the boy toward formal training. The professor agreed to visit the school and hear him play. When the day came, the boy was nervous. He had never performed for anyone outside the school before, and he felt the weight of expectation pressing on him. But when he sat at the piano and began to play, all his fear disappeared. The music poured from his fingers naturally, each note resonating with emotion and clarity. The professor was stunned. He had trained many students over the years, but this boy's ability was exceptional. He could hear a piece once and play it almost perfectly. He could interpret music with feeling far beyond his years. The professor realized immediately that this boy had potential that could take him far beyond the small town, far beyond the limits of his current life. He told the teacher, "This child is a genius. He could study anywhere in the world and succeed." Excitement mixed with worry in the teacher's mind. She knew the boy's family couldn't afford travel or tuition for a prestigious music academy. She also knew he had never experienced life outside their small town. But she also knew talent like his could not be ignored. She began quietly gathering support from other teachers and community members, explaining the boy's skill and asking for help. Donations were made, enough to cover travel expenses and some basic needs for auditions. When she told the boy that a music professor wanted him to audition for a special program, he could hardly believe it. He had always dreamed of sharing his music with more people, but he had never imagined a future where his skill could take him so far. His eyes widened with wonder, and for the first time he felt that possibility was real. The preparation for the audition was intense. The boy practiced every day, sometimes late into the evening. The teacher introduced him to new techniques, helping him refine his touch, his timing, and his understanding of complex music. She encouraged him to imagine the story behind every piece, to play not just with his hands but with his heart. He learned to control his nervousness, to focus on the music rather than the audience, and to trust himself completely. The day of the audition arrived, and the boy felt a mixture of fear and excitement. He had never been on such a stage, in front of such important people. The piano was large and polished, the keys gleaming under the bright lights. He took a deep breath, remembering all the hours he had spent practicing in the empty music room, all the lessons, all the encouragement. Then he sat down and began to play. The music flowed from him effortlessly, each note clear and deliberate, each phrase full of emotion. The judges listened in silence, captivated by the depth and maturity of his playing. Even the teacher standing quietly at the back felt tears prick her eyes. She had watched him grow from a shy, poor boy into someone capable of incredible music, and now the world could see it too. When the final note faded, the room was silent for a heartbeat before applause erupted. The boy's face turned red, but this time not from embarrassment. He felt pride, a feeling so new and powerful it made his chest ache. He had faced the biggest stage of his life and had shared his music with confidence. The judges smiled and nodded, impressed by his talent and the emotion in his playing. After the audition, the boy returned home, exhausted but elated. He had no idea whether he had succeeded, but he felt a sense of accomplishment that he had never felt before. For the first time, he realized that his music could carry him beyond the small town, beyond the limitations he had once thought were permanent. The following weeks were full of anticipation. Letters arrived from the music academy, invitations for further auditions, and messages of congratulations. The boy began to understand that his life was changing in ways he could never have imagined. And through it all, the teacher remained by his side. guiding, encouraging, and reminding him that talent alone was not enough. Dedication, perseverance, and heart were what would carry him forward. Even with all the attention, the boy remained humble. He never forgot the long hours spent alone in the dusty music room, the feeling of discovering notes for himself, the excitement of playing music that no one else could hear. Those quiet moments had shaped him as much as the applause of the audience did. He played for himself first for the love of music, and then shared it with the world. One afternoon, after another long practice session, he sat quietly at the piano, reflecting on everything that had happened. He realized that his journey had only just begun. The school, the teacher, the music room, they had been his first steps into a larger world. Now he could dream bigger, aim higher, and imagine a future where music could take him anywhere. The teacher watched him from the doorway, smiling. She had once been unsure if the quiet boy had any real potential, but she now knew he was extraordinary. She had nurtured his talent, guided him, and now he was ready to step into a future that no one, not even he, could have imagined months ago. And as he played, lost in the sound of the piano, it was clear that his music was more than notes and keys. It was a voice, a story, a promise of what was yet to come, a story that was only beginning. The day finally arrived when the boy was going to meet the music professor who had offered to help him reach a bigger stage. The teacher had prepared him as best as she could, helping him choose pieces to perform and giving him advice on technique and expression. Still, he felt nervous. He had played in front of his classmates and even in front of parents, but this was different. This professor was from a prestigious music academy, someone whose approval could change the course of his life. When they arrived at the professor's small studio, the boy's eyes widened. The room was filled with grand pianos, each one polished to perfection. Sheet music covered the walls, and the faint smell of polish and old wood filled the air. He had never seen anything like it. His hands itched to play, but he also felt the weight of expectation pressing down on him. The teacher gave him a reassuring smile. "Just play as you always do. Show him what you've learned." He took a deep breath and sat down at one of the grand pianos. His fingers hovered above the keys for a moment, and then he began to play. The first few notes were careful, precise, each one testing the piano's response. As he continued, the music grew richer, stronger, more confident. He was no longer thinking about the professor, or the teacher, or even the audience. He was simply playing, letting the music flow through him. The professor listened silently, his eyes widening with every passing measure. He had heard many students in his career, some of whom were considered exceptional, but this boy was different. There was something natural, something unteachable in the way he played. He could interpret the music, make it speak, and yet he was only a boy, quiet and humble, sitting on a small bench as if the world were not paying attention. When the boy finished, the room was silent for a heartbeat. Then the professor smiled and clapped slowly. "Incredible," he said. "I have never heard someone so young play with such understanding and emotion. You have a gift that must be nurtured." The boy blushed and looked down at his hands. He wasn't used to praise from strangers, especially not such high praise. The teacher placed a hand on his shoulder. "See," she whispered. "I told you, you're ready for bigger things." The professor explained that there was a prestigious music academy in the city that offered full scholarships to young talents. The boy could study there, receive professional training, and eventually become a concert pianist if he wanted. His heart leaped with excitement, but reality quickly followed. How could he leave his family? How could they afford even the smallest travel expenses? He felt a knot in his stomach. The teacher noticed his hesitation and took action. She began reaching out to the local community, explaining the boy's talent and the opportunity before him. Slowly, support began to come in. Donations from teachers, neighbors, and local businesses provided enough money for travel and basic expenses. People who had once overlooked him were now cheering him on, amazed by his skill and determination. With support in place, the boy prepared for the audition at the academy. It was a long journey to the city, the first time he had ever left his town. He felt a mix of fear and excitement, wondering what awaited him. The city was bigger, louder, and brighter than anything he had ever seen. The academy itself was enormous, with students rushing through the halls carrying sheet music and instruments, some playing small pieces as they walked. The boy felt both intimidated and inspired. When it was his turn to audition, he entered the grand hall where the judges were waiting. He had never played in a space this large, and the piano was unlike any he had touched before. His hands shook slightly as he lifted them above the keys. The teacher gave him a small nod from the side. "You've got this," she whispered. He closed his eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, and began to play. The notes flowed naturally, full of the emotion and precision he had learned over months of practice. Each phrase told a story: the quiet days of practice alone, the struggles he had faced, the small victories that had built his confidence. The judges leaned forward, captivated. This was more than just technical skill. It was expression, feeling, and understanding that went far beyond his age. When the last note faded, there was silence. Then the room erupted in applause. The boy looked up, eyes wide. The judges smiled and nodded, impressed by both his talent and his courage. The teacher squeezed his shoulder gently, proud beyond words. "I told you," she said softly. "You were meant for this." The days that followed were filled with anticipation. Letters arrived from the academy, invitations to join special programs, and congratulations from teachers and community members. The boy felt a mixture of excitement and disbelief. He had never imagined a life like this, where music could take him so far, where his talent could open doors he had never even knocked on. Finally, the acceptance letter came. He had been offered a full scholarship to study at the academy. The letter felt heavy in his hands, but it was weighty in a good way, a symbol of opportunity, recognition, and the possibility of a future he had only dreamed of. He ran to show the teacher, who hugged him tightly. "I knew it," she said, tears in her eyes. "I always knew you could do it." The boy also thought about his family. They had never fully understood his passion for music, but they had supported him in their own way, providing love and encouragement in spite of hardships. Now, he could repay their belief in him in the best way possible. They cried together when he told them about the scholarship, proud but worried at the same time, unsure how he would manage so far from home. The first days at the academy were challenging. The boy had to adapt to a new environment, follow a strict schedule, and meet other students who were already highly trained. At first, he felt out of place. Some students were confident, dressed in expensive clothes, and played with technical skill he had not yet mastered. He felt small and unsure, wondering if he truly belonged. But he remembered the teacher's words. Talent alone is not enough. Determination and heart matter more. He practiced harder than ever, staying up late to perfect pieces, listening carefully to instructors and learning from other students. Slowly, he began to gain confidence. His natural ability, combined with dedication and practice, allowed him to improve quickly. Teachers who had been skeptical at first soon recognized his extraordinary skill. The boy also made friends, students who shared his love of music. They were amazed by his ability to play complex pieces after hearing them only once, but they also admired his humility and dedication. Unlike some students who boasted of their talent, he remained quiet and focused, letting the music speak for him. His reputation grew quickly within the academy. Months passed, and the boy's skill reached new heights. He performed in small recitals organized by the academy, each time impressing the audience with his precision, expression, and understanding of music. Critics and teachers began to notice him, praising not just his technical skill, but his ability to convey emotion, to make the piano tell a story. The teacher back home continued to follow his progress closely. She wrote letters of encouragement, reminded him to stay grounded, and shared her pride in the young man he was becoming. For the boy, her support was a constant source of strength, a reminder of where he had come from and the person who had believed in him when no one else did. One day, the academy offered him an opportunity to perform at a local music festival, an event attended by professional musicians, critics, and patrons of the arts. The boy was nervous more than he had ever been before. This was no longer a classroom or a small recital. This was a stage where his performance could open doors to a professional career. He practiced tirelessly, focusing not just on the notes, but on expression, timing, and emotion. When the day came, he walked onto the stage, feeling the weight of the audience's eyes on him. He sat at the grand piano, closed his eyes, and began to play. The music poured from him effortlessly, carrying the story of his journey, his struggles, his dedication, and his dreams. The audience listened in rapt silence, captivated by the depth of feeling in each note. When he finished, the hall erupted in applause. The boy looked up, smiling, feeling a sense of accomplishment unlike anything he had ever known. He realized that all the hours of practice, all the struggles, all the moments of doubt had led to this. Music had given him a path, a voice, and a way to change his life. From that day forward, the boy's life continued to transform. He received more opportunities to perform, to study, and to grow as a musician. He remained humble, remembering the small town and the dusty music room where it all began. He never forgot the teacher who had believed in him, pushed him, and guided him when no one else could see his potential. Through all the challenges and successes, the boy learned an important truth. Talent can open doors, but it is dedication, heart, and the support of those who believe in you that truly shapes a life. He had been given a chance and he had seized it, transforming his quiet talent into something extraordinary, something that could reach the world. Years passed, and the boy who had once quietly practiced in the dusty music room became a young man with a talent recognized far beyond the walls of his small town. The scholarship to the prestigious music academy had changed his life completely. He had grown in skill, confidence, and understanding, performing pieces that even seasoned musicians admired. But more than anything, he had learned to believe in himself, to trust in the music that had always been a part of him. The academy provided opportunities he had never imagined. He studied under teachers who had performed on the world's greatest stages, learned from musicians who had dedicated their lives to perfecting their craft, and met peers who shared his love for music. The work was intense, sometimes exhausting, but he approached it with the same determination that had carried him through long hours alone in the old school's music room. Every day he practiced, every day he challenged himself to reach higher, to play with more emotion, more depth, more precision. Performances became a regular part of his life. Small recitals turned into larger concerts, local audiences became regional, and soon he was playing for critics, professors, and music lovers from across the country. Each time he performed, he remembered the days when he had only dared to touch the piano after everyone had gone home, when the music room had been his sanctuary. That memory gave him strength. It reminded him where he had started and how far he had come. Despite his growing fame, the young man remained humble. He never forgot the teacher who had first recognized his potential, who had pushed him to play pieces he thought were impossible, and who had guided him when no one else believed he had talent. She had given him the first real opportunity to share his music, and he carried that gratitude with him every day. Letters, phone calls, and visits kept them connected, and each time they spoke it felt as though no time had passed. One afternoon, after returning from a long tour, the young man received an invitation he could not ignore. A renowned concert hall in the city wanted him to perform as the headline pianist for a special event celebrating emerging musical talents. This was more than just another performance. It was a chance to show the world how much he had grown, to honor the journey that had begun in a small school with a dusty piano and a teacher who believed in him. Preparation for the concert was intense. He spent hours each day practicing, refining every note, every phrase, every pause. He thought about the audience he would face, the people who had never heard him play, the critics who would judge his skill, and the young students in the back rows who might see in him a reflection of their own potential. He wanted to play not just to impress, but to inspire, to show that dedication and heart could create something extraordinary.